So you brought up an interesting point when we were talking yesterday, I believe, where you were like, a lot of people's like questions on your page and stuff like that is like, how is this stuff possible? Obviously using just positive reinforcement. And I think both you and I know, like, it is possible, right? You obviously, you've shown it, right? And past just that, like, I feel like until people really learn to leverage it, they can't understand just how powerful like positive reinforcement is as a motivator, right? That being said, like, you get into stuff, and I look at like my dogs, for example, right? They've all been trained primarily the way that I used to train when I was doing sport dog stuff. They're incredibly motivated. They have phenomenal food drive, stuff like that. But, you get into then the use of like an e-collar or something, right? And for me, like, anytime I go off leash to this day, like, I just don't feel totally comfortable unless I have that on them as like my backup insurance policy, safety policy with things. So how do you, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, right? How do you feel so confident with flight risk dogs, right? Like being able to combat that and safely say like, this dog can be off leash and be reliable and stuff like that, not knowing what the possible outside reinforcements can be in different environments. Does that make sense?
Yes. So I totally understand kind of like what you're asking to go for that. So when I'm working with like flight risks or dogs on their recalls or anything like that, even though I don't use e-collars, sure, I still use other tools that allow safety and accountability for our dogs.
Yep.
Especially like when it comes to choice space, I'm going to give my dog a choice on 99% of the behaviors that I teach them.
Yep.
Until I know, like, this, and I need you to do this type thing. Like if it's safety for, or whatever reason. Recall though is the one thing where I'm like, you don't really get a choice.
Sure.
Like if I say come, I need you to come.
Yeah,
and so that's something where, but the thing is like, we don't want it to be like a recall is always, always, always praised.
Sure.
And I tell my clients, like, if like, say you're working with a flight risk and your dog gets out and they go for a 10-minute run around your neighborhood as you're trying to catch them and they're not coming.
Yeah.
But after that 10 minutes, they come to you, grab the collar.
Yeah.
Walk them home.
Yeah.
Do not correct them.
Yes.
It is a yes, good, come. And then you can walk home silent if you are upset. But the thing is, your dog's not going to correlate that correction with their 10-minute joy run around the
Sure.
neighborhood. They're going to correlate that correction with coming back to you.
Yes.
And like, yes. And so while I was like, I don't use e-collars, what
Sure.
I do use is a long lead.
Yep.
And so long lead, for those who don't know, is just a 50-foot leash. I use 50-foot. You can get them in so many different sizes.
Yeah.
But with that 50-foot leash, I'm allowed to let my dog drag that leash.
Yep.
I don't handle it. Worst case scenario, they make a choice I don't like. I can step on it, call them back, and use that leash for the accountability. Because that accountability is the most important part. If you don't have accountability and you're teaching your dog recall, do not call them to you. Because if you can't guarantee that they're going to come to you, or you can't hold the accountability if they make that choice not to come to you, we don't want to teach them to ignore us. And so we don't want to teach them that we call them 3-4 times and they stick to a smell or they see a bird and they want to go chase that instead, because then you're like saying like, come. And they're learning that they get to just run in the opposite direction and nothing happens. So you do, like, regardless when you're teaching off-leash training and any off-leash behaviors, is you want to start with that accountability. And you want to be able to hold to it until your dog starts to show you that they're making the choices we want them to make and they're seeking value through us rather than that other dog across the field.
Yeah. Understood.
And that's, I think, the thing that a lot of people forget when it comes to off-leash training or reactivity and using choice or using positive reinforcement with their training is there's other components that go into it rather than the whole, my dog just doesn't want to listen to me, or my dog is ignoring me, or whatever it might be. And the thing is, when we are working with our dogs, there's like, regardless of how you're training, you're working against the 3Ds, which is distance, duration, distraction.
Yep.
And those are going to be your 3 main challenges anytime you're teaching your dog a new behavior. Distraction is obviously the hardest one in the sense of we can't always control the distractions around us and we don't know what's going to come up.
Sure.
But distance, I think, is the one that people kind of forget the most. And distance isn't necessarily how far away you are from your dog. For example, putting them in a sit stay and walking away, and you're 20 feet away from your dog. But distance is also how far away your dog is from a trigger.
Yep.
And if your dog is too close to a trigger, reactivity, like defined, is just an overreaction to a situation. And if they are too close to that trigger, they're going to react in the way that they innately want to react. And most of the time it's fear-based. And the goal is to get that trigger away from them.
Yep.
So if you start further away and then begin to pair positive association with the trigger that they are more than likely afraid of, then you can start to slowly move in and get closer and closer and closer until they learn to redirect their attention away from that trigger onto you, even when you walk by it on a normal everyday, like on the street type situation.
Sure.